Hi everyone, I'm Alan. I'm here to talk about something that you will encounter on a daily basis when you're doing research, which is about naming files and managing them. So there are many ways to name files to achieve retained meaning and purpose, but different methods give you difference in terms of the convenience and clarity. There's some good naming example here. So the first one we see, we use the underscore between the numbering and the name of the file. Similar for the second one, but we use a hyphen. And the third one here, we combine the hyphen and the underscore, which I will talk more about them in detail later. And the fourth one here, there's actually two words, but we didn't use any separator or space. We instead use capital A for the second word answer, and in some sense, it's also a good way to name files. There's definitely also some bad naming examples here. So the first one, we just name the file stuff, which is pretty bad naming because it doesn't serve any purpose in terms of clarifying what the file is about. You're probably remembering it at the time you created the file, but after a while, probably a week, when you return to your desk, you just don't remember where you saved anymore. And the second one here, you can see there's a date and there's also the name of file and the numbering. But the problem is there's no clear distinction in terms of which part is which, and there's no separator. So it's pretty hard to read and managing. And the third one here is a little more nuanced. So on the surface, it seems pretty reasonable. You just name the file two words and they're well separated, but you use the space, which is not a good idea in some cases, and I'll talk more later. So the basics everyone knows, if you're trying to name a file using a single word, you can do, say, molecules, and the first letter is capital M, or you don't even have to, you can just do molecules because it's a single word, so it wouldn't be confusing if you're just typing the word. And the third one here, this is relatively rare, but if you do all capital, it's not really desirable in most cases, but it's still readable. It's just not the best way to name a file. And if there's more than one word, there's different ways to connect words. So scenario one is that we don't want you to use any space. If we don't want to use any space in the file names, what we can do is like the one I just showed, you connect the second word right after the first one, or capitalize the first letter. Similar here, but this one is a little more lazier. You only capital the first letter of the second word, which it's still okay. And there is also some bad example here. You can see the first one here, there is also two words. But because I didn't capitalize the first letter of the second word, it's really confusing. And sometimes if the name is long or some more technical words, it's pretty much not readable at all. Similar for the second one, but in this case, it's all capital and it's the same reason. It's not a good way for naming files to achieve clarity and its purpose. And so there's also this camel case. It's kind of a creative way to name files, but I would say it's a little redundant and not too useful in most cases. But I couldn't think of a good example right now. But just so you know that there's also this case exists too. So scenario two is that we want to use space or symbols. So we all know what space is. It's pretty easy to use, and it's the most common space separator we use in emails or text. But when you name files, especially for research, like you're using systems, say like Linux or some more advanced systems, say in Windows or some other software, space is actually not supported in all of them. And sometimes it will cause a lot of compatibility issues because the software or the system couldn't recognize the file or the address that contains any space, or the system just will remove them, which also causes confusion because you originally intended there would be a space, but the system removed it. So just cause confusion on both sides for yourself and for the software and the system you're trying to use. And there's also hyphen, which is pretty much your go-to choice for naming files that you want to maintain clarity and at the same time to separate words. and it's mostly supported in all the systems. And there's also your second choice, which is underscore. So just so you know, underscore is shift with the key that has two horizontal lines on it, which if you just press the key itself, it gives you hyphen. But if you do it with shift, it gives you underscore. Serve a similar purpose as a hyphen, and it's also supported in all systems. So for the systems like Linux, underscore is actually used more prominently than hyphen. Tip here that they can be used interchangeably, and you can combine them to achieve purpose. Say this molecular spectra 12 here. I use hyphen to separate two words, which words that in a single phrase, but I also want to do a naming, so I use underscore to say that now the file name is over and this is number 12 of this kind of file. And there's also some other conventions which also are pretty important. So usually we don't really want to use special symbols in the file names, such as those you can type in with shift and number keys on your keyboard. And in Windows, if you try to name files, there's actually a system pop-up window tells you that the file name can contain the following characters. I believe you probably have seen it at some point. And there's also file name extensions. In some systems are not enabled, so you can't really see them, but there's a lot of different types of files, and they all have different types of extensions. And if your systems are enabled these extensions to, by enabled, I mean you can see them, but if you can't see them, doesn't mean they don't exist. It's just the system has a setting to hide them, and I'll tell you how to enable it. And these are pretty important for files to work properly. And in most cases, when you try to rename a file, just make sure you don't touch the part that after that dot, because they are extremely important and has to be exact to make sure that files work properly. Because if you change them, then you basically just change your file to a different type of file that can be read by a different software or system, even if your file content is the same. So you really have to make sure they stay the way it is unless you want to change them. And here I show you this is Windows 10. You can actually enable this feature by in the File Explorer. There's a View tab on the right. There's this file name extensions. If you checked it, then you can see it in your file names. It's similar somewhere in Windows 11 as well at the same place. I'm not too familiar with Mac, so I'm not going to talk about that. But in Linux, there's no such way to automatically extend the file, and the file names always contain its extension. So you have to be extra careful when you are using Linux to rename your files. Just make sure their extensions stays the same. And that's pretty much what I want to cover today. Thank you.